Welcome to an Introduction to Persons with Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities online training. Before we begin, if you would like to print this PowerPoint, you can find it below the video under Handouts and Resources. Your presenters today are myself, I'm Georgianne Rumsey, a Project Director here at the ARC.
And I'm Paris Gatlin, Program and Service Supervisor here at the ARC.
Our learning objectives today are to learn what is an intellectual and developmental disability, important components to a welcoming place, considerations for talking with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and learn what is plain language and how to create accessible written materials and meetings. The online training will give you information that can help you at the ARC. The ARC was the first grassroots organization to advocate for the rights of children with disabilities. To this day, the ARC continues to be an organization of families, volunteers, donors, and staff that together support people of all ages. People who are included in this are Amelie and Abby, who are pictured at the upper right of the slide, who are learning how to use their voice to communicate their choices. And then there's Nathan, pictured on the left, who was able to access healthcare with the support of the ARC. Or Tricia and Kelly, pictured on the lower right, who are demonstrating their leadership to fight for the rights of all people with disabilities. The ARC supports the rights of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families. We help them to be included and participate in their communities. Simply stated, we're here to help individuals and families achieve a good life. When parents of kids with disabilities first founded the ARC some 70 years ago, there really were no services. Many parents at that time were told when they welcomed a new baby into their family to put them in an institution and forget about them. But many parents said no, and they brought them home and instead used their own creativity and collective strength to achieve opportunities for their children. They literally changed the world through grassroots action. And today, that power is still the bedrock of the ARC. When people share their passion and work together, they can achieve great things. So what exactly does the ARC do? The ARC Minnesota serves many counties throughout the state. There are different regions throughout the state where staff and volunteers are there to support the mission of the ARC. The ARC nationwide has more than 700 chapters. Our services span the lifetime and address issues such as early intervention, education, the transition to adulthood, employment, housing, healthcare, guardianship, and more. So what is an intellectual and developmental disability? Well, intellectual and developmental disabilities are lifelong, and they include persons with Down syndrome, autism, cerebral palsy, Fragile X syndrome, and more. With the exception of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, which is caused by a mother drinking alcohol during pregnancy, the cause for intellectual and developmental disabilities is often unknown. It can and does happen to anyone. An intellectual disability is a below-average cognitive ability that has three characteristics. One is an intellectual quotient, which is between 70 or 75 or below, or many people call it IQ, significant limitations in everyday life activities, and that the onset of the disability occurs before the age of 18. Intellectual disabilities are diagnosed through the use of standardized tests of intelligence and looking at adaptive behavior. It is not determined by IQ alone.
Sometimes intellectual disability is also referred to as developmental disability, which is a broader term that includes autism spectrum disorder, epilepsy, cerebral palsy, developmental delay, fetal alcohol syndrome, and other disorders that occur during the developmental period from birth to the age of 18. Intellectual disability can be caused by any condition that impairs development of the brain before birth, during birth, or in the childhood years. Several hundred causes have been discovered, but in about 1/3 of people affected, the cause remains unknown. Factors that can impact causes include genetics like Down syndrome, Williams syndrome, or Fragile X syndrome, or problems during pregnancy, such as the use of alcohol or drugs by a pregnant mother, or malnutrition, environmental toxins, or illness that the pregnant mother is exposed to. Fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is the only known preventable intellectual and developmental disability. There is no cure, but it is preventable. It is caused by drinking during any stage of pregnancy. There is no safe amount, no safe time, and no safe kind of alcohol used during pregnancy. Fetal alcohol spectrum disorder causes permanent brain damage. Cerebral palsy is caused by damage to the motor control centers of the developing brain and can occur during pregnancy, during childbirth, or after birth up to about age 3. Or problems at birth or after birth, such as difficulty during the birth process where the infant doesn't get oxygen, or after when a child is exposed to a childhood disease that causes brain damage. And finally, due to poverty or cultural deprivation. Children who grow up in poverty are at a higher risk for malnutrition, childhood diseases, and receive inadequate health care. Unknown intellectual and developmental disabilities include autism. We don't know at this time what causes autism. Rates of incidence of autism is increasing. According to the Center for Disease Control, most recently, 1 in 68 individuals are diagnosed with autism, a 2012 statistic. Persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities struggle with conceptual skills, using words in reading, managing money, time and number concepts, and self-direction. Social skills is another one. Developing interpersonal skills, understanding social responsibility, having a good sense of self-esteem. They may be gullible, lack life experiences compared to people without disabilities. They may lack the ability to follow typical social norms and rules, and struggle to obey laws and unable to avoid being victimized. Practical day-to-day skills they may struggle with include activities of daily living such as brushing teeth or bathing. Also, occupational skills, managing their own health care, making arrangements for transportation, being able to manage schedules or routines that get them ready for work or school. Understanding how to maintain their safety, use of money, use of the telephone. The ARC serves people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and say that instead of saying the mentally retarded, sometimes people ask, well, doesn't the R in ARC stand for retarded? It once did, but in 1991, we changed our name from the Association of Retarded Citizens to simply the ARC. It is no longer an acronym. We made changes because the term retarded has become an offensive and harmful label for people with disabilities. In addition, the diagnosis of mental retardation refers to individuals who have low IQs. The ARC serves all types of developmental disabilities, and often individuals with disabilities like autism or cerebral palsy have a normal or high IQ. So how many people are at risk? 1 in 10 families in our community has a member with an intellectual or developmental disability. This is the largest minority group and the most diverse. Today, many people with intellectual and developmental disabilities will live to be seniors. This was not true some 50 years ago, when many times parents would outlive their children with disabilities. The ARC, like many organizations, provide information and assistance by phone, email, or someone can stop in at our office. Advocates with the ARC can also answer questions from individuals or family via our website through our Ask an Advocate. Advocates at the ARC want one-to-one assistance and sometimes intense advocacy for adults with disabilities and their family members, covering a wide range of topics. The topics listed on the slide represent our current area of focus. We continue to research issues, trends, and disability policy to provide current and accurate information and support. The ARC is one of the rare organizations that also provides one-to-one individual advocacy or support without charge. Government systems are complex, fragmented, and difficult to access. Advocacies help people with tough situations and give them tools and trainings to overcome challenges. It is at the heart of what we do.
What makes you feel welcome? A welcoming place is one in which all people feel included. It is a place where all people are treated equally, as well as equally regardless of difference. These places are where we live, work, shop, exercise, practice our faith, get help when we are sick, and enjoy entertainment with family and friends. It seems ideal, doesn't it? Unfortunately, many community programs, schools, businesses, faith-based communities, and other organizations over the years have not created places that strive for the ideal. They failed to create welcoming areas where all are welcome. Many organizations and individuals have made choices that are based on difference. They have treated others unlike themselves differently than the rest. Welcoming places are able to meet people when they are at their best and also when they are challenged. An example of this happens possibly weekly for many of us. The work of the ARC places us in the community where we may come across a parent with a child with a disability or an adult with a disability. You see a child or that adult struggling. They may be yelling loudly, crying, basically being very disruptive. What can you do? In the next few slides, we will talk more about this.
Regardless of who we are, what background we come from, what our ethnicity, we all have one thing in common, and that is the basic need to belong. Only when we experience a sense of belonging can we learn, grow, and give back to others to our fullest potential.
Inclusion is a sense of belonging, feeling respected and valued for who you are. It is about feeling supportive energy and commitment from others so that you can do your best work. A place or program is inclusive when it uses the richness of who attends as the diversity to achieve its goals and objectives. A friend of mine, Donna, who worked for many years at a fast food restaurant, she became very frustrated with her manager and other employees. She was usually not asked for her thoughts and ideas, and many times experienced a lack of support from her coworkers. Donna quit her job because she didn't feel acknowledged as a contributing member of the team. She took a job at a different location for a few months, and then she returned back to her fast food employer. The time away made her manager recognize how important Donna's positive attitude is towards her work and has created a workplace that includes respect and values Donna's input and values Donna for who she is in the work setting.
Any community will be stronger when you take advantage of the diversity that is around you. If a community, place, business, or program is diverse, but the members take little or no advantage of the breadth of that experience, then it is not reaping the benefits that diversity has to offer. There are the hopes and the dreams of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to have a valued social role within community places, workplaces, faith communities, or at school. Some of you may have had experience at a shopping store, eating out at a restaurant, or at a concert or a special event, and have witnessed someone that is not at their best. Many times it may be a child with a parent, but possibly it is an adult that is trying their best. They may be crying out or yelling out or possibly threatening to push things over or throw things around. Many times in these situations, there is a parent or a caregiver present trying their best to manage the situation. The child or the person they are with may be experiencing a meltdown. What is a meltdown, you may ask? Put simply, a meltdown is a state of neurological chaos where the brain and the nervous systems overheat and stop working properly. It is called that because it's the body's equivalent to a meltdown in a nuclear power plant, in which the fuel in the reactor core becomes so hot that it melts and it releases energy. Sometimes it gets so hot that it causes an explosion and the energy is released outside of its core. It's this explosive reaction, meaning crying, yelling, or lashing out, that most people refer to when they talk about meltdowns. How are meltdowns different from tantrums? Meltdown and tantrums can often look the same on the outside, but that's where the similarity ends. A tantrum is a voluntary battle of wills to try and gain control over a situation. It is designed to draw attention for the sole purpose of satisfying a want, like refusing to leave the supermarket without candy. So once that goal has been met, the outburst quickly resolves itself. Meltdowns, on the other hand, are almost the complete opposite. An involuntary physical and emotional reaction to being placed in an overwhelming situation from which there is no easy escape. The person isn't in control of trying to get attention. In fact, they are often unaware of things that happened around them.
So things to consider to help a parent whose child or a caregiver who's supporting an adult who is having a meltdown. First, offer to help. Simply say, "How can I help?" They may ask you to move things away or redirect others away from the person, their child, or an adult that they're supporting. They may hand you a piece of paper or a card, which could have some instructions on it that really shares with you how you can help. Most likely, the parent will say that they don't need any help, and that's okay. Offer to do something specific, possibly offer a bottle of water or just start to redirect bystanders away. May run interference until the child or the person has calmed down. You can say something supportive like, "You've got this," or "Parenting sure can be tough at times," or "You are a great parent." Let the parent take care of the child or the caregiver take care of the adult having the meltdown. Don't offer any advice. Some examples of what not to say are, "You need to get your child under control," or "Don't take that person out in public," or "You need to get that person help," or "If you don't get that person under control, I will have to ask you to leave." All these statements are not supportive in helping. Don't be offended if the parent or the caregiver rejects your help. The person may just need space and need time to quiet down. Parenting a child or caregiving for a person with a public meltdown feels very isolating. From the parent or caregiver perspective, the stares and judgment hurt because they just want their child or person to be understood and accepted. When they take their children with unpredictable behavior out into public, they step outside their comfort zones because they endure possible ridicule from others. Step outside your comfort zone, offering a simple gesture of kindness and connection to a parent helping a child or a caregiver working with an adult through a challenging moment.
Our language can reflect attitudes. Words are powerful. The words we use to refer to people shapes our beliefs and ideas about them. Old and inaccurate ways we describe people with disabilities support negative stereotypes and prejudiced attitudes. Like gender and ethnicity, disability is one of many characteristics of being human. When we use labels to describe a person, we devalue and disrespect them as individuals. Our words both define and reflect our everyday life and can promote positive attitudes about persons with disabilities. It is important to remember that people with disabilities are people first, and their disability does not define who they are. It is a respectful way to always refer to the person first and the individual with the disability rather than disabled person. One of the handouts that was available was the People First handout by Kathy Snow. As you can see from the list, there are some great examples. Number 1, people with disabilities instead of handicap or disabled. Or, he has Down syndrome rather than he is Downs. Or, he has a physical disability instead of he's crippled. Also, she uses a wheelchair instead of she's confined to a wheelchair or wheelchair bound.
Here are 6 things people with disabilities want you to know. Accept me for who I am. We all are here with gifts and talents. We all want to be valued for how we can contribute. Understand that sometimes I need a friend. People with disabilities are just like you and I, wanting friendships and relationships. Being a friend is an important social role. Talk to me as you would any other person. You may need to ask or confirm with a person, or you may want to ask what works for them in explaining things. Let me try to do my best. We all want to be acknowledged for trying our best, what worked in our attempt, and having input in how we might do it the next time. Don't feel sorry for me. Once again, acknowledge what I did do well and what I can do the next time to do it better. Be patient when I mess up. We all mess up in our lives. What is it that you want from others when you mess up? It is the same for people with disabilities. It could be that the instructions that were provided didn't really work for them. Ask how it might be explained in the future that will support them.
When talking with a person who has a developmental disability, here are some things to consider. Be specific and concrete. For example, please give me the red hat, or do you want an apple instead of a banana? Use keywords. If they are attending a meeting or shopping at a store, what are the keywords? Who or what are they looking for? How can I help you? Give directions 1 to 3 at a time. Maybe they need a visual or a picture to help them remember. Ask the person to repeat it back to you. You may say, I just want to make sure we are understanding each other. Here is what I heard you say. Is that correct? If you are having difficulties understanding them, apologize and ask them to repeat it again until you get it. If you are really struggling, you may ask if there is someone that they would invite into the conversation that could help you understand. Avoid a no or a yes. Give a choice of answers so the person knows what their options are. Understand that it may take time for them to think and get what you are sharing. Give them time to think, then ask what they understand is the next step. Reassure them that it's okay to ask questions to clarify next steps. Important to remember that even if a person doesn't use words to share their ideas, this doesn't mean they can't understand your words. My friend Brian taught me this lesson. Brian used a smile, a grimace, a nod of his head, thumbs up or down, a wink of his eye, contagious laughter, a sigh, and many other ways to let me know exactly what he was thinking. He was patient with me as I learned his language. Communication. Use proper names and avoid talking down. Speak directly to the person. Don't just give to talk to a person's parent or the staff member who supports them. Keep eye contact. If a longer conversation in a quiet area may be better. Establish eye contact before you begin speaking. This can be tricky in that some cultures establishing eye contact is not a norm. This is also true for some disabilities. You may have to work what works best for the person for their comfort. Use gestures to help support what you are talking about.
So what is plain language? Plain language has been around in the United States since the 1940s. In 1978, Jimmy Carter signed an executive order that each regulation is written in plain English and understandable to those who must comply with it. Most recently, President Barack Obama signed the Plain Writing Act of 2010, which required federal executive agencies to put all new and revised covered documents into plain language.
So the goal of plain language are to help people find the information, help people understand the information. These are important goals to consider then meeting a person with a developmental disability for the first time and the use of plain language. Remember, number one, you and the person with the disability are more alike than different. All people have hopes and dreams. Number two, believe that you can communicate, gesture, write a note, read body language. Number three, honor each person. Respect and believe in their rights to their whole life. Number four, be polite, ask questions. They will answer if they choose.
When developing work documents, here are some important considerations. Write to the 5th grade reading level. In other words, strive to use common everyday words. To determine the reading level, you can use Microsoft Word, go to the Review tab, and then do a spelling and grammar check. And at the end, a box will pop up with readability statistics. And at the bottom of the box, there is the Flesch-Kincaid grade level. You may find that some technical terms, for example, intellectual and developmental disability, may increase the level. Use short sentences. 1 subject per sentence, possibly 5 words per sentence is ideal. Short paragraphs, utilizing 1 subject or step per paragraph. Use an active voice. An active voice is clear, concise, and direct. A passive voice is less clear. The person doing the action usually follows the verb. For example, Bob was promoted by his boss. Use nouns. A noun names a person, place, thing, or idea. For example, father, house, hat, and friendship. Avoid pronouns. A pronoun is a word used to replace a noun like he, me, it, or there. Lists, they make it easier for the reader to identify all items or steps in a process. Add blank space for easy reading. It is recommended to have 7 items or less in a list. Tables can also help. Using tables saves words. It makes the structure clear and makes it easy in when complex materials need to be looked at. Acronyms can be very difficult. Most people struggle to know what they mean, and many times we miss a lot of the conversation or instructions because they get lost inside of acronyms, or people struggle trying to think out what does the acronym mean and they miss the conversation. Use headings. This allows the reader to quickly find information. Headings also break up the information, it increases blank space on the page, and it helps the reader navigate the document. There are 3 types of headings. There's question headings, statement headings, and topic headings. Question headings are the most helpful. They can be written to your audience to help them find the information they need, like, where can I apply? Next are statement headings, because they are the next specific, like applications accepted here. Topic headings are the most formal, but tend to be the most vague and sometimes very difficult to understand. For example, the title General or Application. It's important to be specific, providing dates, times, amount, and size.
Here are some examples of everyday words. The list on the right are plain language. Instead of anticipate, use expect. Instead of commence, use begin or start. Here are some examples of hidden verbs. You can change your writings to have less words, which is helpful. If you compare the list on the left to the list on the right, you will see the list of the right is shorter. When you are writing, see if you can use less words and still get across what you mean to communicate. Size and font can make a difference to the reader. Use 14-point font for body text, 16-point font for headings. Fonts that work are sans serif, which is plainer and holds up better when scanning and photocopying. Many individuals prefer the Arial font type. Headings and subheadings help break up the information. Double space and give wide margins. Justify left helps, along with breaking up large paragraphs. Use bold and not italic, or underline because they are and can be harder to read. Bold is easy to read. It helps people to find the important words or with sections.
Cartoons are sometimes seen as being childlike, and so you want to consider that and possibly avoid using cartoons if possible. If it is not a clear picture, why is the picture there, then you want to make sure that you include a description, and the picture should also represent the material that you're explaining. In the example on this slide of the house on the left is clearly a house. The house on the right is dark and it appears more like an apartment building or a hotel. A simple picture is always best. If highlighting an area on an image, use a circle, not an arrow. Do not use pictures that have a glare to them.
To make meetings accessible, use pictures and have a presentation if needed. In the meeting, do not use big words or any acronyms. During the meeting, use breaks and pauses to allow everyone to have time to understand what is being discussed and to figure out their questions. Ask people if they have questions throughout the meeting. You need to be prepared to break things down just in case someone doesn't understand. It is helpful to have the agenda in advance of the meeting. Ask the person how much time in advance of the meeting do they need it. Some people learn better with visuals, so make sure there is a poster board or a whiteboard, so if someone doesn't understand, you can draw what you are saying. If you have any materials you will be talking about, offer printed copies. For PowerPoints, print note pages if they would be helpful to explain the presentation. Make sure the notes are in plain language. If printing just slides, print 2 to a page, then the font size would be large enough.
Do not make up your mind about persons with developmental disabilities in advance. And it's important to set aside your past experiences. Ask the person really what works for them. Or if it's a child, you may want to ask a parent what will work for that child in supporting them or talking with them or supporting them with whatever it is you're doing. Some adults with disabilities may be difficult to understand with their speech. If there is someone who supports them with communication, ask the person if you can invite them into that conversation to help you understand them. Each person with a disability is uniquely different. For example, no two people with Down syndrome are the same. Always ask if they need or want help and avoid pity. Ask them or their caregiver or parent what is that they want their child to learn and how you can assist them. Be yourself. This means talking, laughing, and giving positive and negative feedback, just as you would with anyone else. Consider how you want to be treated with that value and respect, and treat them in the same regard.
So when should you make adaptations? If someone requests an adaptation, it is easy to make and do so. One thing to consider with adaptations is about sensory integration. Kids and adults with intellectual and developmental disability and autism may have sensory challenges. As with all of us, our ability to be concrete and can be impacted by what goes on around us. Be sensitive to understanding that of others. So, how many senses do we have? There are more than 5 senses. Most people are familiar with 5 senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. However, we also receive input through 2 additional senses. The vestibular sense, or movement and balance sense, give us information about our head and our body and how they are in space. It allows us to stand upright while we sit, stand, and walk. Proprioception, or body awareness sense, tells us where our body parts are relative to each other. It also gives us information about how much force to use in certain activities, allowing us to crack open an egg without crushing it in our hands. Most activities require us to combine information from many different senses at the same time. Think about a toddler. They use touch to explore the texture of their food. Proprioception, or that body awareness, brings the food to their mouth, smell, and taste to identify different types of food. And the vestibular sense, to sit upright during the meal. As your child grows, they learn how to take in and process all this information at the same time and focus their attention on particular sensations while ignoring others. Some children and adults have difficulties receiving and processing these sensations, making everyday tasks frustrating. You may have to ask if there is something that is needed to support the person to eliminate some things that are frustrating for them. For example, a particular smell of a perfume or soap may be the cause. Being in a room with fluorescent lights, being in a room where there is a lot of noises are some examples.
What kinds of environmental supports already exist for persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities? When thinking about the office or store where you work, a location of the community where you are meeting with a person with a disability, think about these things. Make sure the space is accessible to the person. If they use a wheelchair, are the doors and hallways and meeting space able to allow them to move easily and freely throughout the space? And are there accessible bathrooms available for their use? You may want to post signs and charts or provide easily understandable directions to assist the person with disabilities with getting around your office, store, or meeting space. Or you could ask them if you could walk with them to show them the way to the meeting space or bathrooms. You may want to ask the person what type of supports are needed. Some people with physical limitations will have a family member or a personal care attendant or a staff member available to help meet their needs. If you don't know, you can always ask them how it is that you could support them if someone isn't there to support them. This may be a good conversation to have in an area that allows for some privacy. Ask if they would like to move out of a heavy trafficked area to share with you how you can best support them. If you have questions regarding a request about how to support them and whether this is something that falls into your responsibilities, check with your supervisor. For example, I was presenting with Mary, who uses a wheelchair. Before the presentation, we took the time to make sure that the room with the tables and how they were set up were made it for her able to maneuver her way around in her wheelchair. And this was important so that she could engage the audience in the training that we provided together.
All of us are sensitive to transitions in our daily lives. For some people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, they may need more time to transition. They may be slow to adapt. They may hate surprises and may find it challenging to shift from one thing to another. Transition or changes can be stressful. They will need to know what to expect because the unknown can cause stress for them. So be patient with all of their questions about what will happen. They're just trying to be comfortable with the situation and seek clarification. Forewarn, let the person know what's going to happen. For example, you may want to find time prior to the meeting to go over the agenda to let them know the timeline for each of the topic areas. Or you may want to start your meeting with going through the agenda to highlight what will be discussed and how much time to anticipate spending in each of the areas. Explain plans for the meeting they are attending, their work day. This provides structure for the person and helps them know what to expect so that there are no surprises. Allow time for transition, again, because transitions can be stressful. And if this applies to your particular circumstance, you may want to give them an alert before changing activities. So for example, we have 10 minutes before a break, 5 minutes before a break, or 2 minutes to wrap up, and now it's time for a break. Use this time to make a phone call, use the bathroom, and we will begin again at 1 p.m.
So here are some tips for success. Concentrate on the person. Find out, as you would with anyone, what works best for them. If you do not understand something, ask the person to repeat what he or she said and then repeat it back to them and confirm that you understood. Be patient. Take as much time as necessary to communicate effectively. Avoid communication in noisy public places. Talk in a private, quiet area when possible, particularly when discussing things that apply only to that person. Do not speak for the person or attempt to finish their sentences. If you're having difficulty understanding what a person is saying, consider writing or using electronic mail as an alternative means for communicating. Offer to help, such as opening a door or carrying packages, if it makes sense. Ask yourself, what would I want as far as help in this similar situation? Consider a person's wheelchair or walker as an extension of their body. Therefore, leaning on the wheelchair or walker or placing your foot on the wheel is not okay. Talk to the person who uses a wheelchair at eye level whenever possible. Perhaps you should sit rather than stand. Select materials early so that they can be developed into accessible and plain language formats in a timely manner. Using materials which are available in electronic format is a good step towards accessibility. These are handouts that are additional resources that can support you in your work with the ARC. Please take the time to look over these, and they are listed under handouts and resources at the bottom or under the video. Thank you for listening to our online training today. If you need any additional resources or have additional questions, please speak with your supervisor.